Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Engineering the Future, the podcast where we explore what's next for the world of engineering. And today we're joined by someone whose work spans aerospace, data science, public health, and even disaster response. José Miguel Zavala González. Did I pronounce it correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's originally from Puerto Rico, studied at both MIT and Georgia Tech, and now builds tools that make a real change in the world. Jose, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Abel. Thanks for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. You're from Gurabo, Puerto Rico, and growing up, what got you interested in engineering?
Yeah, so growing up, just as a kid, I used to like watch a lot of science fiction or just TV in general. And there were always all these little gadgets and gizmos going on that caught my attention. And I think the first really big thing that got me into it was anything that had spaceships in it, like Star Wars or anything like that, that just had planes flying around in space. That was probably the big thing that for me caught me my attention towards like, hey, maybe I should try studying some of this stuff. And that's what got me into aerospace eventually.
Did you watch a lot of like American like fiction movies that like with space and everything?
Tons of them. Just anything that at some point, anything that flew up was just pretty cool. Like I think it was definitely like some of it was Star Wars, but I can't pinpoint right now which one was it that continued it. Also a lot of video games. But it really caught the creativity behind it really caught my attention. And it was just like when while I was a kid, I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. Or I could, I can do some of that. And
Yeah.
that's what really got me to it. Is like maybe if I look, this is super interesting, the math and science parts and the physics because if you look at learning these equations or these concepts, they can lead towards the spaceship somehow. So that was kind of the train of thought I had as a kid or as a teenager, really, like the years passed, and that took me from point A to point B, studying engineering.
Okay. That's interesting because there's two types of people I feel like that go into engineering. One of them are like the ones who are passionate about it since they were like 8 years old, 9 years old. It was destined for them to do engineering. And the other type is, like motivated by money and expectations of parents. Maybe that's more
Yeah.
common like second world, third world countries. And, like going, like securing their future. So I'm assuming that growing up, you didn't necessarily dream of a place like MIT.
Not really, no, because it's I didn't have it. I didn't plan for it for sure.
Mhm.
But especially in Puerto Rico, and there's a amazing university on called and the University of Puerto Rico, and they have an engineering campus where it you just hear glowing reviews from it, and that's basically where all the engineers that come from Puerto Rico that study at Puerto Rico. I think that's like the dream school here, and
Mm.
it's really cool, and it has a lot of programs that it's just a very bright place to be if you want to be an engineer here while also being accessible. And honestly, I didn't plan for MIT at all because like Mayagüez, the engineering campus here was already plenty. It's just that when the opportunity did show up then and I had the chance to take it, well, I took the opportunity. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think people that have had like a passion for engineering since they were children will excel more? Because like, do you think you need to love engineering to excel in it?
I mean, loving it is helpful, but as always, as with everything, everything's a skill that you got to practice. Especially, I think that I mean, I'm just going off bit of a tangent here, but if you're starting from the point of view of like I am a child and I love engineering, then I think the leg up that gives you is that if you can then connect the dot that for me to keep enjoying engineering or do engineering, I have to be disciplined in my studies,
Yeah.
whether that's like your eighth grade algebra or, that maybe that motivation might not be there otherwise. I
Mhm.
think that accumulated over the years, that really does give you a leg up because you're just practicing a skill for years. And if
Yeah.
it's like the love of engineering when you're 8 or 9 that helps you do that, then that might really help a lot. But no matter when you start, it's all about the practice and starting to putting in the effort to get better at what you want to do.
So maybe you don't necessarily need the discipline as well if you've had that love for it compared to someone else.
I think in that case, it would be you've exercised that discipline unknowingly,
Yeah.
and you always need the discipline or the practice in general. Yeah, you always need to keep moving forward, keep adding little steps to it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, on that note, you earned your bachelor's degree from MIT and your master's from Georgia Tech, two top engineering schools. What were the biggest lessons you took from each experience?
Ooh, let's see. Yeah, so definitely while we were on topic of discipline on MIT, it's a very much a whirlwind 4 years. For example, especially as I compared to my local Puerto Rico peers who studied engineering here. In Puerto Rico, you have more flexibility when it comes to taking an internship or a semester long co-op, and there's really no rush for that.
Yeah.
MIT, you're basically on a 4 year counter and you have to make really good use of that time. In terms of there's a point where it does feel like it's super rushed, honestly, and where once you get to the more like that you junior year classes, it's all classes and projects, and you really have to squeeze the time to do anything else.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important in the sense that, like, hey, how am I using my time? Am I doing what I want to do?
Yeah.
And because otherwise you're really in a rush because you're busy. You're really busy, but you need to sometimes stop and ask yourself, hey, is this aligned with what I want to do, or what else do I want? I think there's definitely a lot of the time management aspect that specifically was tailored towards MIT, because MIT is it's a bit strict about that. Everybody needs to graduate by that 4 year mark.
Yeah.
And for when you compare it to other schools, you'll notice that I think it's like the 4.5 years or 5 years that's a little more typical.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. I feel like something about managing the time correctly is like one of the biggest lessons I learned from MIT. Hey, there's not much time, but there is so much to do. And what do we do about that?
Did you manage to squeeze in other things like extracurricular activities, maybe going out, hanging out with your friends in that time?
Yeah, definitely. There was space for like one or two extracurricular activities. It's the thing about breadth or depth, where like if you want to put in, for me, it was at least where if I wanted to put a lot of time into one extracurricular, the others really had to like make space for it.
Yeah.
Um, whether and my friends and I, we definitely spend time to see each other, especially since like and it's one of these colleges where there's dorms, so everybody's relatively accessible in terms of you go to one building, there's a bunch of your friends there, so
Yeah.
that's really nice. And even if everybody's kind of just stuck studying or doing homework in a rush, you can still kind of sit together and spend some time. And then when you do get some time to spend hanging out, going outside, that one's really nice because it's special when you get a group of. It's not easy often to get a group of people together that they're all busy and have their separate schedules. So there was chances to do, but you appreciated it more
Yeah.
once you understood how rare it was.
I heard there was a saying called if you do engineering, there's getting sleep, getting a 4.0 GPA, and a social life, and you can only choose two of the three. Would you agree with that notion?
Sometimes, maybe a little bit. Sometimes sleep was definitely a challenge. Sometimes, but it's all about scheduling and discipline and what makes everything work. For example, let's say you work on an extracurricular. Let's say you're like actually ticking all three boxes off, but you want to join an extracurricular, but the only time slot where that extracurricular can meet is like a little later than you'd want. Maybe you like sacrifice the sleep a little, or maybe your studying time a little budges a little bit. It's a bit of a balance, honestly. And I think it's something that you have to play by ear
Yeah.
in the sense that you know your specific situation, and how that fits into making the rest of the time like
Hmm.
actually fit in. So it really depends, but it's definitely challenge. It will that balance is challenged, is what I'm trying to get to say.
Yeah.
It's always challenged. Sometimes it feels like pick zero out of the three if you don't know how to balance at any of them, if you're still starting to learn how to balance them out.
So time management is definitely a crucial thing that you need to learn if you want to go to these top prestigious universities.
Yeah, like there's definitely a lot of it you learn while already being there because you really need to while you're there. But if it's something that you want to learn beforehand, I think it's most useful when you're managing your time for like studying for SATs, or I don't know if they're still using exactly that test, or all the AP tests, etc. That studying time you allocate for that's I think how the closest you the closest I've seen where the time management aspect is like the key concept there, especially all these standardized tests where you just need to sit down and need to study, and I need to do practice exams, and the practice exams can range anywhere from 1 hour to like 4 hours. That's I think like pre-college, like the biggest thing in terms of time management for studying.
Yeah.
I remember back in my day.
There's a lot of people today that actually like disagree with the formal education system. And now for you, do you believe that the workload that you had in MIT translates into your work as a data scientist today?
Yeah, I mean, and everything the what I've noticed is that everything that interests you, since you have an eye for it because it interests you, you'll start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
So the work you put in towards that one thing might show up in 10 other different places, including a couple where you just happen to be working at, or the section or the topics you tend to be working at. As, for example, especially the more you dig into the fundamental for the more fundamental concepts like the mathematics, the physics, the economics, these tend to show up relatively everywhere, no matter what job you're exercising, and that's when the practice and the knowledge you gain at one area ends up being applicable everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think I definitely see it a lot, especially on the mathematics, like the pre-calc, the calculus, the differential equations, or the multivariables. All of that that's just a little very general ends up showing up everywhere else because and no matter what kind of engineering you do, it's always math, science, physics based, and it translates really well. So again, the more effort you put into like understanding those deeply,
Mhm.
I think the more reward you get, no matter what you end up doing. It opens more doors, is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say.
So then in your case, you changed from aerospace engineering to data analytics. Can you like delve into that more? Can you?
Yeah, part of the reasons were practical. Like in Puerto Rico, I live around towards the center of the island and leaning a little metropolitan area.
Yeah.
But the aerospace sector here is mostly on the western coast, which isn't that far when you compare it to, for example, the United States. It's a really small island
Yeah.
relatively, but not enough. And I wanted to stay in the area I'm currently living in. And I said, hey, I'm actually also really good with computers and technology and data science, because I can take a lot of some information. And again, just the idea of you look at math, numbers, physics, information, and say, I can understand this. I could also learn how to communicate this. And I had a chance to do the Department of Health, and I said, hey, I want to let me try actually going down this lane for a little bit. And it turned out really well.
Yeah.
And it was a little more on the practical reasons, but I also really did like the aspect of saying, hey, I have a bunch of numbers and I can actually understand and tell you a story of what's going on behind them. Hey, you see this number, it's being caused because of this thing we did, or that happened a few weeks ago. You can see it reflected on the tables, and you can see there's this ramp up that might lead to something else. And there's a story behind. If you look at numbers deeply enough, you might find a story behind them. And on the storytelling aspect, it resonated with me a lot. And that's why it's a little bit of the reasons why I'm there now.
So then you learn about data analytics in aerospace engineering?
Not necessarily. I think it was a little more, I think, on the side of I've always been interested with computers besides aerospace.
Mhm.
While I had the interest on the spaceships and everything, I also was very deep in high school and like messing with my laptops. Kind of ruined one or two of them accidentally, but I playing around with the software of them and just installing something onto them or whatever, and just playing around with that. So when I did get the acceptance to MIT, I was like, okay, I'm going to study aerospace because Puerto Rico at the time did not have like an aerospace program. So it
Yeah.
was like I kind of thought of it like a no-brainer.
Mhm.
But basically, as the years went by, I also did get stuck on the idea of the data and the storytelling aspect of it. And seeing again, just lately here, it was a bit of more of a practical reason. I said, hey, I might have a little bit more opportunity here right now if I go on this side. And essentially, when I did start my master's degree, and I got offered the job at the Department of Health interpreting data for COVID response, like immediate COVID response,
Yeah.
that was like, well, yeah, that sounds amazing. And it was, and the team was amazing. That's how I met Danilo and a couple other people that I still see today.
Okay. So you have no regrets in not pursuing aerospace engineering when you look back at it now?
I mean, the door's never closed. I still feel like I got plenty of years ahead of me in terms of just working, and I haven't closed that door entirely. But I'm happy with the choices I've made so far professionally. Yeah.
And you're working now at Espacios Abiertos, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
So what exactly are you working on right now? That's
Yeah. So recently, let's see, this is one of those cases where data and information, if you can interpret it like, just look past the raw numbers a little bit, you can find a lot of stories to tell. For example, in the latest project we published, we looked at, oh, sorry, I should give a bit of an explainer what Espacios Abiertos does generally.
Mhm.
Espacios Abiertos is a nonprofit, local nonprofit that focuses on economic security and stability in Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
And what that means is that we touch topics that necessarily wouldn't be touched on a business case. It's really about interpreting public policy and how it impacts people and how it helps or hurts people. For example, one of our flagship projects is that there's a government program where if you're a working family that earns between some income, the government gives you money because they're saying, hey, we see that you're working some full-time job or not some full-time job that you're generating some income, and we want to like give you this money just to incentivize you to keep working that job and bringing money to the economy, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And it turns out that when you look at the numbers within that, you find that it can shift poverty quite a bit. Like I think it decreases poverty by around 4%,
Yeah.
which is an insane number. And you see that like people can and do work more because of that program, or how much money is spent on that, or how much money is spent on helping other families, and you see all these numbers come together, and you just see like, yeah, this is just some tiny. You say at first, oh, this is a simple program, it's a tiny program. Then you look at the numbers and say, whoa, it's actually huge. It's helping all these thousands of families, like almost 500,000 families, which is again a big number in Puerto Rico. There's about, I don't know how to count it in families, like well, in between 1 and 2 million families in Puerto Rico. But so when you say that you're like helping around half a million of them, that's a huge number here. And I think that's basically the kind of work we do at Espacios Abiertos, where you really look at the policy side, see how it's impacting people. And I think there's not many chances to do that anywhere else.
Mhm. And do you think the government is very cooperative with what you guys do?
I think that, for example, in this example I mentioned,
Hmm.
this is a program they're sponsoring. I mean, this is a program, sorry, not sponsoring. This is a program that they're leading, and they're very cooperative when it comes to analysis that like shows that this program is helpful, and it is helpful.
Hmm.
They're more cooperative in those programs. Anything else that might be a little more government accountability or calling them out a bit, Um,
It's the
the,
power
the,
outage tracking system that you built, right?
which one? Sorry.
The
Oh
power
yeah,
package system. So that
yeah. That's that's definitely its own thing. Exactly, in the sense that that one's been collected on its own, and no, I would not expect the same. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail pretty well. Like on the one hand, expect a lot of cooperation on something like the government subsidy that's being really successful. But if it's a project like a power outage tracking mechanism where it highlights like shortcomings of the current system or the current administration's approach to the system, anything that can be interpreted as such,
yeah.
uh, you'd probably see resistance to cooperating on anything like that. So it
Before
all depends on how you frame it.
yeah. Before we get into the power outage tracking system, can you talk about what it was like working for the Puerto Rico Department of Health during COVID?
Yeah. So it was the team itself was really amazing in that when it says I know that it's part of the Department of Health, but within it there was a small team, relatively small team of contact tracing, where basically when you had COVID, you would get a phone call and somebody would ask you a couple of questions about, hey, how are you feeling? Where did you get it? Where have you been? And that set of questions is what was processed by the team I was employed at specifically. And it was really amazing because, you know, government has its own speeds, how fast it moves in general.
Mhm.
And here with this team, it was really actually moving amazingly quickly. And I felt like they really had their feet on the ground. And it was actually inspiring because everybody knew what they had to do or knew what their expertise was. And we had good people leading it together. And it was like a really healthy bubble inside government because I know government during COVID was not always the most it was sometimes controversial, but inside this little bubble in the contract tracing effort was amazing because you had everybody was like really young. Like I'm saying that probably the average age must have been like mid 20s,
Mhm.
and but they were actually moving at a breakneck pace and showing we were all moving at a breakneck pace and showing these results where hey, we can find out really quickly that the impact that restaurants, gyms,
Yeah.
and just public congregation spaces were having in COVID. And we could see that we brought this team of really young professionals together. Like I must have been like 20, 21 at the time. And they had me like looking at the interview data for like all the municipalities in Puerto Rico. And I also had with me like I was a teammate with several other team members that were also still doing probably college studies,
Hmm.
and some of them ran like some of them ran a different genetic study, some of them ran a different type of I forgot the name of it, but I forgot the term, but everybody ran their own thing, but at the same time everybody was learning on the spot, and everybody was also still doing amazing at it.
Yeah.
Like everybody was a bit of improvising on the go, or learning on the sorry not improvising, learning in the moment and still doing amazing, and while everybody was still being young. It was like the opposite of imposter syndrome in some ways.
Yeah. It was you felt home in that environment.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Everybody was very clear. Everybody had their feet on the ground. Felt like you didn't necessarily have to deal with some of the governmental politics, at least not immediately.
Mhm.
And that felt really helpful as somebody who started to start out their career.
So then were these people engineers or were they from all walks of life?
All of it. Like we have like professional mathematicians on the team that could work out a lot of it, a lot of the data that was coming in. I didn't work directly with them, but I saw what the work they were doing and just how their managers basically said, "Hey, we can actually connect how to apply like pure mathematics to what we're currently doing and make it work," and they did. And at the same time, we had I think people that were studying some kind of engineering but wasn't directly data related, and they would still make the best out of that and like do really well. And then, for example, I think you met Danilo, where like he's studying now a PhD in neuroscience, and he led like this analytics team.
Yeah.
And so all of it, you can see all of it.
So,
And just if they found a spot for you, a role for you, honestly, you could make it work. Yeah.
yeah. It seems like the role of maybe STEM students in public service and crisis are actually very, beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything, honestly, yeah, especially like for example, now that you mentioned like the public sector in general, like any maybe even roles that you wouldn't immediately consider STEM,
Yeah.
but still have like a still require a deep knowledge of the numbers and ratios and percentages and anything that might get reported as a metric
Yeah.
that still uses STEM skills, like especially on the math side, but maybe brings in a little more of the social aspect. For example, in Puerto Rico here, we use demography a lot in terms of understanding our situation, in terms of our population, how it's changing, and how that impacts the economy and everything else. And demography is, you might not identify it as a STEM career, but it uses math heavily while also leaning on the social science side really heavily. And when you see it in practice, it's actually really math heavy. And like I would easily compare it to STEM job on the sense that like, hey, look at the number of math and social science you're applying. It's like, it's challenging. It's really challenging, but it's not directly associated with STEM, for example.
Yeah. So the role of STEM is definitely important in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Anything that where you use math or any kind of science, basically it's technology. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything else because technology and engineering is like STEM is usually more associated with the TE of technology and engineering,
Yeah.
where like I feel that the science and math side could really be, you could stretch it out a little bit, the definition of it, and see that it actually still works wonderfully
Yeah.
instead of like leaning too much on the technology and engineering side. Yeah.
Can you tell us about Lose PR, the power
Yeah.
outage system you built?
Yeah, basically that's a web page that aggregates together information about power outages in Puerto Rico because Puerto Rico we have a lot of power outages. It's a bit seasonal how often we get them, but
Hmm.
there's definitely a lot of them throughout the year. Some of them come in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes, for example, last New Year's Eve we had a big power outage that lasted about, at least where I'm living, 4 or 5 hours on New Year's Eve. That's which is a bit of insane. But the way this information is officially reported, you have a table kind of like the one shown on the page, but that is only shown for 5 minutes. And for 5 minutes, you get told, hey, right now, there's this many thousand people in region one without power, and region two, there's this many thousand. And then in 5 minutes, that's information wiped entirely from the face of the earth, and you get the snapshot for the next 5 minutes. And the problem with that is that it's a very narrow view of what's going on throughout the day or throughout the years, really.
Yeah.
And what the Luz Pere aims is to just give you a wider view of what's going on instead of lasting 5 minutes, it lasts around the whole day.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically that's the big idea behind it, that it gives you a better snapshot when you see it, like the number of people without power increase. You notice trends, like for example, hey, there's almost no power outages at night, and then you see it rise up around 6 7 in the morning. You notice, oh, that's when people start waking up. Maybe that's when they start reporting their power outages, or maybe that's when more people start plugging things in or turning on stoves, and maybe something crashes and the power outages start rising again. But that's basically the big idea, where like the official sources right now have a very narrow time frame, 5 minutes, and I wanted to expand it a little bit so we have a little more perspective on how often these power outages happen, how intense are they, do they happen in the middle of the night? Sometimes yes. And looking at all this type of information, that again tells a story
Hmm.
of what's going on with the power here.
What was the reaction of the government to your project?
I have not received that reaction yet. I am okay not having a reaction yet, because it just gives me a little more time to like collect this data.
Hmm.
But just so you know how this typically goes, for example, when there's a huge power outage in Puerto Rico,
Yeah.
like a big one, normally they shut down their official reporting entirely, even if it's for a few hours, because again, it's all about the perspective you put on the data, and sometimes the perspective on their power outage numbers is that, hey, the power utility is reporting that this many hundreds of thousands of families are without power, and they're quoting the power utility website that's owned by the government. So, or something similar. Not always. It's not owned by the government anymore. But there's people. There's companies at stake here. So what they do is that they shut down their reporting for a couple hours, so it stops getting quoted.
So then is there bribery involved between the government and these companies
Um,
to like,
that I don't. I would say it's more to do with like public relations in general,
yeah.
because like if you're a company and you're in somewhere in a power company in Puerto Rico, you're controversial just by existing, in the sense that like, hey, you better do a good job, or you're kind of out, and or just public opinion skewed very negatively towards the current power companies. So it doesn't help if your own information that you're self-reporting is being used against you. And I think they just shut it down sometimes just so they get stopped, like
Mm.
news people from keeping quoting them in a negative light. Which again, the news people are doing well in that sense, because hey, I mean the information's real, the information's correct. It just doesn't. It's just not convenient for them to like keep it up. They just shut it down.
Yeah. So do you think this will have an impact towards the power outages in the future? Like, you think the government will make more initiatives to, prevent that from happening?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. Um, yeah, I don't know, because a lot of it's really dependent on that. Like our power infrastructure is like ancient,
Yeah.
and how well the current companies can maintain that. Uh, Frankly, it's definitely out of my far out of my expertise, but I have no idea.
Okay.
Just but generally, my best hunch, if I had to have a hunch, it would be that with climate change and the increasing heat waves, everything just becomes harder to manage. So really depends on how we manage all of that.
Okay. All right. Well, I think one thing that stands out in your work is how much of it serves people, whether it's disaster relief, like the power tracking system or public health tools. Do you think you've always had like a desire to help others? Maybe people from your own.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's just that, again, even from like that sci-fi lens as a kid in the spaceships, there was also a lens where like technology can be used to serve good. And especially, I think that's why the software and the information side also appealed to me a lot. It's because that if you can interpret this information, you can build the story that gives people the knowledge to do something better, or find a better way to improve. And I don't mean only in like, for example, a business side. I mean just even on a very personal side. Um, and I've always felt like I've had that. Like if I found a way where it can be used, I could try, and it really interested me. I would try to find some time to work on it a little bit,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to the COVID side and the power outages side, where I would see that, hey, especially on the power outage side, there's not really anything about this going on. And it's like this balance of when like when you mentioned the extracurriculars, like how much time do I have for like a quote unquote extracurricular nowadays? And the extracurricular is actually this little project, and it's actually relatively achievable, but at the same time could be pretty high impact over time.
Yeah.
So I think that's when like I would say I'm gonna add my little grain of sand here and work on this a little bit and see if it helps eventually.
Okay. It's interesting. Yeah, on the topic of software, your resume mentions Python, SQL. are JavaScript, MATLAB, and just a lot of programming languages. For students listening, should they learn coding as engineering students? And if so, where should they start?
It really depends on a case by case basis. I know that like colleges per se are having a bit of a couple of years where recently they've been pushing it no matter what. I think some of them even considering, hey, everybody needs to take at least an introductory course. But I really do think it's a bit of a case by case basis. For example, if you were more interested on the website development side, that might be more useful if you're doing some kind of marketing or freelancing, where you might need to like do a little bit more of that marketing side. Or if you're a little more interested on the engineering side, it depends on if there's something really specialized where, for example, you might use something like MATLAB, where it has like a lot of engineering specific packages that can help you for electrical, mechanical, or structures. And that MATLAB can tends to be very engineering heavy.
Yeah.
Uh, or if you're more of a generalist and you just want to get your hands on coding, maybe just start with Python, and it's a little, it's just friendly, and you don't need to put that much time into it for you to get something out or to make any versatile use of it. But it really depends on what you're studying or what you plan on using it for, if it's on the job or if it's for some specific hobby thing. It really, really depends, and I wouldn't jump into any one thing before you have like an idea of like, hey, maybe this is what I want to kind of do. But if it's just for like learning for learning's sake, I would just start with Python. It's pretty friendly.
Okay. And in the day and age of AI, for young engineers, I mean, what do you see the future in the day of in the day and age of AI?
Yeah, I would recommend any future engineer, especially while you're on your learning phase, especially if you have the chance to like go to college and you have a few years carved out specifically for learning. I would say to like avoid a lot of like all this chat GPT stuff while you're for the learning purposes, because it's really hard to tell when what it's telling you is correct and when it's just blatantly incorrect. And if you have a few years available to you to spend that time learning, I would say like make the use of that time to learn through a little more rigorously, so you can defend yourself when like maybe in a couple of years AI comes up and just says, oh, you look at this, our AI can do everything. You're educated enough to know, hey, the AI just said like five things and three of them were horribly wrong. You're able to recognize that, because if you lean too much on the AI as a crutch, you're gonna depend on whether it's right or not. And right now, these AIs are not right often enough for them to be safe to use generally.
Yeah.
But really, again, in the context of learning, make use rely a little more reliable sources. Like even Wikipedia can be better than AI sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that definitely. If you're on your learning path, just find good sources to learn and try not to lean too much on AI.
Okay. So there is still a future for engineers in the in what we can see.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because the thing is that AI can, again, the problem is that like all these new AIs are really popular right now. They're useful for sure, but they're only as useful as you can feel sure that they are correct.
Hmm.
And right now, it's really easy to get them to say something completely wrong in a very confident way.
Yeah.
And if we as humans don't learn to recognize the difference, then we're just going down the wrong way. So there's there's I think there will always be a future where engineers are needed. I don't feel like AI is like challenging that. I think AI is challenging like the idea that they're needed, and there's people saying, "Oh, well, we'll replace everybody by AI now," and but that's just the wrong path again, because
Well, I think
yeah, basically we need the human touch on everything.
yeah, I think that's exciting news for anyone that wants to pursue engineering and is more on the technical side.
Yeah, I mean, again, you put in the effort to learn, study, especially if you have the chance to like to some college. That the point of going to college is that you have a couple of years set out specifically for learning. Is
Mhm.
that if you use those years well, you'll already be much better than any the whatever newest AI is out on the block. So honestly, I would say if you have the chance to learn and study, I wouldn't worry too much about AI.
And so I know the time's run out, so a quick round of questions before we wrap up. You just need to say the first thing that comes to mind. So
Okay.
what's the favorite project? What's the favorite project that you worked on?
Probably the contact tracing efforts of the Department of Health. Very practical, very fun, good, great team.
Public service or private innovation?
Um, Public service with a couple asterisks, but generally, I think public service.
Coding or hands-on building?
Ooh, honestly, I would still say coding for me. I want to get on hands-on building someday, but I haven't gotten into that yet.
Mhm. A book, podcast, or video, or a person, something that someone said that shaped your thinking.
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think I remember at some point somebody telling me that it's about like it's not only about what you're good at, but it's also finding something that you're good at and that you can like or you can enjoy doing. And knowing what you enjoy doing helps like set your goals for a lot of the stuff that remains, a lot of the decisions that remain, something like that probably.
Success is much easier when you're passionate about what you're doing.
More like passion gives you direction.
Mhm.
And honestly, sometimes it's just about like where do I go next. That getting that question answered often is really helpful.
Well, Jose, thank you so much for being here. Your work is incredibly inspiring, and I think our listeners are walking the whole new view of what engineering can do, or even STEM. And
Mhm.
to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow, share it with someone who dreams of building the future too, or share this to someone that, may be interested in engineering or may find engineering interesting in the future. And thanks for listening, and see you next time on Engineering the Future.